Welcome to today's deep dive. We are jumping straight into a really fascinating piece of source material today.
Yeah, we really are. It's a great one.
It's this brief, highly specific gardening field note published on July 15, 2026. It's by a writer named Ang, and the title is The First Harvest of the Spicy Jatropha.
Right. And on the surface, it's a seemingly simple document, just a few paragraphs.
Very short.
Exactly. It's pulled from a much larger body of work called Notes on Gardening, and specifically, this is part 956.
Which, I mean, that immediately tells us we are dealing with a seasoned observer here.
Oh, absolutely.
Someone who has cataloged their garden nearly 1,000 times. But within this tiny, isolated snippet about a single plant, there's this incredibly complex biological drama playing out.
There really is.
So today, for you listening, our mission is to explore the paradox of this plant, a plant that looks super appetizing but is entirely toxic, the mechanics of how it actually reproduces, and the unseen, invisible forces that just make it all happen.
Yeah, and I think the value of analyzing a note like this, especially for you as the listener, is that it forces us to kind of reevaluate how we look at the cultivated nature around us.
Right, like our own backyards.
Exactly. We tend to curate our gardens and our patios for aesthetics, right?
Okay.
We want them to look beautiful. We want a nice vibe.
Of course.
But the biological reality operating underneath the soil and inside those leaves and in the air around those plants, it is governed by a completely different, often ruthless set of evolutionary rules.
Oh, totally ruthless.
And Eng's note really captures a moment where those two worlds just collide.
And the craziest part is the catalyst for that collision wasn't even like a deliberate scientific observation.
No, not at all.
Ang wasn't out there with a magnifying glass conducting some formal botanical survey.
Right.
The text actually tells us that the author was out in the garden just evaluating a new mobile camera. They were literally just testing out the lens on their phone.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that detail, I think that is incredibly telling about how we interact with our environment today.
How so?
Well, we often frame consumer technology as this barrier between us and the natural world, right? Like it's a distraction that keeps us looking at screens instead of our surroundings.
Yeah, people are always saying, put your phone down and go outside.
Exactly. But here, the digital lens actually functions as a bridge. It prompted the observer to look closer, to frame a subject, and in doing so, they noticed this biological milestone that they might have just walked right past otherwise.
I love that. And so through that phone screen, Ang discovers that the spicy jatropha, or jatropha-integerrima, as the text knows, has finally started to bear fruit after its initial bloom.
It's a huge milestone for a gardener.
It is. But the very first thing Ang admits is this massive blind spot. They write that they have absolutely no idea which insect actually pollinated the flower to create this fruit in the first place.
Which is such a brilliant admission, honestly.
It really is.
I mean, here's a gardener who has written 956 notes on this exact environment. They water the soil, they prune the leaves, they monitor the growth every single day, and they completely miss the most critical event in the plant's entire life cycle.
Right.
Yeah.
It really makes you realize how much of the heavy lifting in nature is outsourced to just completely anonymous contractors.
That's a great way to phrase it.
But okay, let's unpack this for a second because I want to push back on something here.
Sure.
Ang specifically points out that this plant is toxic.
Yes, highly toxic.
And we are going to get to the specifics of that toxicity in a minute. But if the plant is poisonous, why would an insect go anywhere near it? Wouldn't the nectar or the pollen just kill the pollinator?
That is the ultimate chemical balancing act for a toxic plant.
Okay.
Because a plant like the Spicy Jatropha, it absolutely needs an animal vector to reproduce. Its flowers are structured in a way that requires an insect to physically transport pollen from a male flower to a female flower.
Right, so it has to attract them somehow.
Exactly. It has to attract insects to survive.
Yeah.
But at the exact same time, it needs to defend its leaves and its stems from being eaten by, caterpillars or beetles or browsing mammals.
So how does it not just accidentally poison its own workforce?
By heavily partitioning its chemical defenses.
Partitioning?
Yeah, so the plant concentrates its toxic compounds. These are often things like diterpenes or alkaloids. It keeps them in the vegetative tissues, the leaves, the stems, the sap.
Gotcha.
But it keeps the nectar, which is essentially just this sugary bribe for the insect, relatively toxin-free.
Wow.
Or, and this is where it gets really fascinating, in some cases, plants will actually lace their nectar with just a microscopic trace of a toxin.
Wait, really? Why?
Not enough to kill the pollinator, but just enough to give them a slight chemical buzz. It makes them dependent, basically, and forces them to keep coming back to that specific species of flower.
That is wild. I
Yep.
mean, that is literally like a coffee shop putting an extra shot of caffeine in your drink so you skip the competitor across the street.
It's exactly like that. It is a highly, highly specialized relationship. The insect gets the reward, the plant gets its genetics transferred, and it all happens entirely under the radar. Aang's new camera captured the result, but the actual transaction was just completely invisible.
I mean, isn't there something almost poetic about the fact that this crucial moment of creation, the actual pollination, happened completely out of sight, right under the gardener's nose?
It's incredibly poetic. It reminds you that the garden doesn't belong to you.
Exactly. It's like, imagine you set up this high-tech security camera to watch your house looking for burglars, but instead you accidentally capture this quiet, beautiful moment of a fox walking through the yard.
Yeah, that's exactly the vibe.
Okay, so the camera has brought this new fruit into focus. And Aang describes the arrival of this fruit as a, quote, tiny berry.
Yes, a tiny berry.
I want to pause on that phrase because for me, the language here creates this massive cognitive dissonance.
Oh,
You
absolutely.
hear the name of the plant, right?
Yeah.
Spicy Jatropha, and then
Yeah.
you hear it produces a tiny berry.
The terminology paints a very specific, very deceptive picture.
It sounds like a snack. I mean, spicy implies a flavor profile. It sounds like an ingredient for salsa. And a berry implies something you'd toss into a morning smoothie. If you put those two concepts together in a domestic garden setting, human instinct basically screams, this is an edible experience.
It does. But the text immediately provides a very stark reality check.
Oh yeah, it shuts that down fast.
Pang references a previous discussion in the notes, stating unequivocally, all parts of the spicy jatropha contain compounds that are considered toxic if ingested.
All parts, not just the sap. The tiny berry is toxic too.
Exactly.
I mean, imagine having this, imagine walking out onto your patio and you have this vibrant, beautiful plant sitting there. It has a super fun name. It produces these cute little berries, but it is fundamentally dangerous.
Yes.
It is a strict look but don't touch scenario.
Right.
Which honestly brings up a huge question for me.
What's that?
From an evolutionary standpoint, what is the point of a toxic berry?
Right.
Because my understanding is that plants produce fleshy fruits, specifically so animals will eat them, wander off, and poop the seeds out somewhere else.
Right. That's the classic seed dispersal model.
So if the berry kills the animal that eats it, the seed doesn't go anywhere and the plant fails. So why build a toxic berry?
You are hitting on a really crucial distinction in botanical ecology, and it has to do with targeted defense.
Okay.
Toxicity is rarely a universal poison. It is usually highly selective. So a compound that is lethally toxic to a mammal like a human or a dog or a squirrel might be completely harmless to a bird.
Wait, really? Their digestive systems process the chemicals that differently?
Distinctly differently. And there's a mechanical reason for it too. Mammals have teeth.
Okay.
We chew our food. So if a mammal eats a berry, it is likely going to crush the seed inside with its molars, which completely destroys the plant's chance at reproduction.
Oh, I see.
So the plant evolves toxins specifically targeting mammalian receptors.
Yeah.
Birds, on the other hand, don't chew.
Right. They just swallow it whole.
Exactly. The fleshy part is digested, and the hard seed passes through their digestive tract completely intact, getting dropped miles away with a convenient little dose of fertilizer.
Wow. So the plant is essentially acting like a bouncer at a club. The toxicity is just a velvet rope saying, no mammals allowed, birds only.
That is one very common strategy, yeah. However, looking closely at the rest of Hang's note, we actually uncover a different biological mechanism at play here.
Oh.
Yeah, so Aang refers to it colloquially as a tiny berry, but based on how the text describes the next phase of the fruit's life, it is not actually a botanical berry at all.
Wait. Aang is using the wrong word. After 956 notes.
Well, in a strict botanical sense, yes, though gardeners use the term loosely all the time.
Okay, fair enough.
A true botanical berry remains fleshy, right? Think of a blueberry or a grape. But Aang notes that to harvest the seeds, they have to wait until this fruit, quote, turns dark and begins to dry out or split open.
Yeah, I remember that part.
Fruits that dry out and split open are botanically known as capsules, not berries. The fleshy, berry-like appearance is really just a temporary immature phase.
Okay, that changes the whole dynamic for me. Because if it's a capsule meant to dry out, then it doesn't want to be eaten by anything. Not mammals, not birds.
Nothing at all.
So what's the point of the toxins then?
In this case, the toxicity isn't about selecting the right animal for seed dispersal. The toxicity acts as a chemical force field.
A force field.
Yeah. While the seeds inside are still developing and they're vulnerable, the outer casing is plump, it's green, and it is loaded with toxic compounds to ensure that absolutely no herbivore takes a bite and ruins the gestation process.
Wow.
The plant is just aggressively defending its offspring until they are fully mature.
That makes perfect sense. It's armor disguised as a snack.
Exactly.
But I feel like that leads directly into the human contradiction here. Because Aang knows it's toxic. The text explicitly states, therefore this fruit is not for consumption but is merely for decorative purposes.
Yes.
And it's wild to me that we are willing to cultivate poison, water it, photograph it, write 956 notes about it, entirely for the aesthetic value.
It speaks volumes about our relationship with nature, doesn't it?
It really does.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we actively invite dangerous flora into our living spaces simply because we prioritize visual pleasure over practical utility. The gardener understands the rules of engagement with the spicy jatropha. They respect the toxicity.
But because it's just for decoration, the ultimate goal isn't to harvest a crop for the kitchen table, right? The goal is to just get more decorations.
Right.
Aang wants to propagate the plant. But this is where the note shifts from this exciting, spontaneous moment of discovery into what honestly sounds like an agonizing test of patience.
Oh, absolutely. This is where the gardener's schedule must completely submit to the plant's biological timeline. And biological timelines cannot be rushed by human enthusiasm.
No, they cannot. Aang lays out the exact chronological steps required to cultivate this plant, and it goes completely against a normal gardener's instincts.
How so?
Well, think about it. If you grow tomatoes, you wait for them to get big and red and juicy, and then you pluck them at their absolute peak. But with the spicy jatropha, Aang writes, right now, we have to wait until the fruit turns dark and begins to dry out or split open, and only then can we harvest the seeds for propagation.
It requires a fundamental shift in perspective. You have to realize that you are not harvesting the fruit, you are harvesting the potential contained within the decay of the fruit.
But I mean, why can't Aang just cut it open?
What do you mean?
Well, if the camera just revealed this beautiful new tiny berry and Aang wants the seeds inside, why wait weeks for it to turn dark and shrivel up? Why not just take a scalpel, slice the green berry open today, extract the seeds, and plant them?
Because if you do that, the seeds will simply rot in the dirt.
Really?
Yes. When the fruit first appears, the seeds inside are essentially embryos. They're soft, they're underdeveloped, and they are entirely dependent on the moisture and nutrients that are still being pumped in from the mother plant. The seed coat hasn't hardened yet.
Oh, I get it. So they aren't even viable yet.
Not even close. The visual fading of the fruit, that process of turning dark and drying out, is not a passive process of death like we tend to assume.
Right.
It is an active, vital process of maturation. As the outer tissue dries, it gradually cuts off the moisture supply to the seed, which signals the seed to harden its outer shell and enter a state of dormancy.
Okay, so it's a necessary transition.
Completely necessary. Without that dormancy phase, it can't survive the transition into the soil.
So what does this all mean for the gardener? It's basically like baking a cake that you aren't allowed to eat, and you just have to sit there and wait for it to completely dry out and crumble just so you can plant the crumbs to make another inedible cake.
That is a very funny but very accurate way to look at it. Yes, it goes even deeper than that, especially with plants that split open, which is a process botanically known as dehiscence.
Dehiscence. Okay, explain that. Because when I read dry out or split open, I just pictured like a dead leaf gently crumbling in the wind.
Right, but it is far more dynamic than that. The spicy jatropha belongs to a family of plants called Euphorbiaceae, the spurge family, and many plants in this family don't just gently crack open, they engage in explosive dehiscence.
Wait, explosive?
Yes, explosive.
Oh, like literally?
Literally. As the outer tissues of the capsule dry out, they shrink. But the inner layers of the capsule are structured differently, so they don't shrink at the same rate.
Okay.
This differential drying creates immense physical tension across the surface of the pod. It is literally building up mechanical energy over time.
Oh, wow. So it's less like watching a piece of fruit rot and more like slowly winding up the handle on a jack-in-the-box.
Yes, exactly. Or drawing back the string on a bow. The desiccation is pulling the structural fibers taut, tighter and tighter over whence, until the structural integrity finally just fails.
And then what?
When it reaches that critical threshold, the pod snaps open violently, physically launching the heavy seeds away from the mother plant.
No way.
Yes. It launches them so they don't have to compete with the mother plant for the same sunlight and water.
That is incredible, and it totally recontextualizes the waiting game that Aang is playing here.
It really does.
You aren't just waiting for the plant to die. You're waiting for a biological catapult to finish arming itself.
Yes.
And if you intervene too early, like if you get impatient and try to force the pod open before that tension has fully developed and the seed coat has hardened, you just ruin the entire mechanism.
You completely sabotage the propagation, and that is why the discipline of the observer is so important here.
Yeah.
The initial discovery was instantaneous, right? A quick look through a mobile phone camera.
Yep.
But realizing the value of that discovery requires long-term restraint.
It is a massive journey packed into just a few short sentences in this note. I mean, let's trace the arc of what Aang actually documented here because it covers so much biological ground.
Let's do it.
It begins with this intersection of consumer technology and nature, right? A casual attempt to just evaluate a new camera lens suddenly brings a whole biological milestone into sharp focus.
And that focus immediately reveals an invisible dependency.
Right.
The mere existence of the fruit proves the existence of a pollinator, this completely unseen insect that is navigating a highly toxic landscape just to facilitate the plant's reproduction.
Exactly. And then we have the deceptive nature of the plant itself, the innocent-sounding tiny berry of the Spicy Jatropha, which, looks like a snack but actually acts as a highly toxic chemical force field to protect the developing seeds from predators.
Yeah.
And we as humans cultivate this danger in our own backyards,
Right.
merely for the sake of aesthetics.
We do. And finally, we arrive at the sheer mechanical patience required to keep the cycle going, the necessity of yielding to the plant's timeline, recognizing that the darkening and drying of the fruit isn't decay at all, but an active buildup of mechanical tension.
A biological catapult preparing to launch the next generation.
What?
You can't force the pod to split. You can't cut corners. You just have to sit back and observe until the mechanism triggers itself.
And, for anyone listening right now, I think the most vital takeaway from Aang's gardening note is a reminder to question the surface level of the environments we manage.
Yeah.
Even a quiet patio or a small garden bed, it is an active, intensely competitive arena. The plants we choose for decoration are engaged in silent chemical warfare. They are brokering hidden partnerships with insects. They are engineering complex mechanical structures to launch their seeds.
It really makes you look at potted plant completely differently.
It should, yeah.
We think we are in charge because, we hold a watering can, but the plants are running their own deeply complex operations right in front of us.
They are operating on a scale and a timeline that simply ignores our presence entirely.
And Aang managed to peek behind the curtain of that operation just by taking a moment to test out a new phone. It's a great reminder that you don't need to travel to a rainforest or, build a billion-dollar laboratory to witness complex biology.
No, not at all.
You just need to pay attention to the dirt on your own porch. So, as we wrap up today's deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a thought to mull over as you go about your week.
It's a good one.
If a beautiful, toxic plant in a quiet, curated garden relies on an entirely unseen insect to reproduce and uses a hidden mechanical tension to launch its seeds, what other invisible connections are quietly shaping the ordinary environment around you right now, just waiting for you to point a lens at them?